The twin sons of Varthel were just beginning to rise when Daniel stepped off the shuttle and onto the stone landing platform. The air was cool, yet there was a dry heat hiding underneath it, promising a blazing day ahead. Around him, the spaceport was quiet except for the sound of banners flapping in the morning breeze. The banners bore the crest of the Dreven Empire, a jagged blade crossed with a thick-handled mace. Daniel adjusted his collar and glanced at the line of tall, armored figures waiting for him. The Dreven were unlike any species he had met before. They stood a full head taller than him, their skin a deep bronze, and their armor looked as if it had been carved from mountain rock. They carried weapons that seemed more like siege tools than personal arms. Even the smallest Draven spear looked heavy enough to bend steel. At the front of the group stood Commander Riva. Her armor was dark silver, marked with patterns Daniel did not understand. She carried a massive mace, its head made from a single block of black metal with faint glowing lines across its surface. It looked like a weapon that could crush a starship hatch. When she stepped forward, the rest of the warriors lowered their heads slightly, showing her their respect. "Daniel of Earth," Riva said, her voice steady but powerful. "You have come to speak for your people. You seek peace. But the Dreven do not trade words without first testing the ones who speak them." Daniel had been briefed on Dreven customs. He knew they valued strength and courage as much as honesty. What he did not expect was what happened next. Riva stepped closer, holding out her mace. "This is the Mace of Stormhall," she said. "It is the weapon of my line. No outsider has ever held it without their knees giving way. Take it if you wish to speak here today." Daniel hesitated. He had been warned about Dreven challenges. They often tested visitors, but this was not a simple handshake. The mace looked like it weighed more than he did. Dropping it would not just embarrass him, it would send a clear message that humans were too weak to stand with them. The Dreven warriors were watching closely. He could feel their eyes on him, measuring every twitch of his hand. Backing down now might mean losing any chance at peace talks. His mission would end before it began. Daniel took a slow breath and stepped forward. He wrapped his hands around the thick handle. The surface felt cold at first, then strangely warm, as if the weapon had a pulse. Riva released it into his grip. The weight slammed down into his arms. His muscles strained immediately. It was heavier than anything he had ever tried to lift, and for a moment he thought his arms would give way. But he locked his elbows, tightened his grip, and forced himself to stand tall. His boots dug into the stone beneath him. A wave of silence spread through the Draven. Even the wind seemed to stop. The other warriors tilted their heads slightly, as if they could not believe what they were seeing. Riva's eyes narrowed. But there was a new look in them now. It was not mockery, it was interest. Daniel kept breathing steadily, refusing to let the weapon drop. Every second felt like a minute. His shoulders burned. The mace seemed to grow heavier with each heartbeat, but he held it as firmly as he could. Finally, Riva stepped forward again and placed her hands back on the handle. She did not take it from him immediately. Instead, she spoke so all could hear. "He does not fall," she said. "He does not yield." The Draven around them murmured in low tones. Daniel did not understand the words, but he could tell they were speaking about him. Some looked surprised. Others looked troubled, as if something unexpected had just happened. Riva lifted the mace from his grip, holding it with one hand as if it weighed nothing. She studied him for a moment longer before turning to her warriors. "By the law of the stone oath," she said, "he has taken the weight and stood under it. The bond is made." Daniel frowned. "Bond? What bond?" Riva's gaze turned back to him. "In Draven tradition, when one holds the weapon of a commander without falling, they accept a pact of honor. You are bound to my side until the pact is fulfilled." Daniel's heart sank. This was exactly the kind of situation he had hoped to avoid. "Commander Riva, I'm here to talk, not to fight." "You are here now as more than a talker," she said. "To refuse the bond would be to spit on our law. Do you wish to insult the Dreven?" Daniel glanced around at the circle of armored warriors. Their expressions were unreadable, but the tension in the air was thick. If he refused, his mission would fail, and the Dreven might not welcome another human envoy for years. If he agreed, he would be pulled into something he did not fully understand. His mind raced, weighing his options. The weight of the mace was gone, but the weight of the moment had only grown heavier. Finally, he nodded. "I will honor your tradition," he said. "I will stand by you." The Dreven gave a short, sharp cheer. Riva's expression softened slightly. "Then you will march with my warband. You will see our land and know our trials. When the pact is fulfilled, we will speak of peace." Daniel forced himself to match her gaze. "Then I will see it through." Riva turned sharply, her armor catching the light of the rising suns. "Come. The others will want to know the human. Who holds the Storm Hall mace?" The warband began to move, their heavy boots echoing on the stone. Daniel followed, his mind still spinning. He had come here as a diplomat, but now he was part of a Dreven warrior's bond. Whatever lay ahead, it would not be what he expected when he first stepped off that shuttle. The banners above the port shifted in the wind again. The crossed blade, and Mace caught the sunlight, casting long shadows over the path ahead. The march from the landing platform led Daniel through the heart of the Dreven capital. The streets were broad and paved with smooth black stone. Towers of carved rock rose on either side, their walls etched with battle scenes and swirling designs. Everywhere he looked, Dreven citizens paused in their work to watch the warband pass. They spoke in low tones, eyes following the human walking in their midst. Riva walked at the front, her mace resting across her shoulder. She did not speak much as they moved, but Daniel could feel her attention on him, as if she was still judging him with every step. Behind them, the other warriors carried their own weapons, each one unique but all looking heavy enough to break stone. They soon reached a large circular building with wide gates. The stone was polished to a dark shine, and from inside came the sound of many voices. Daniel realized this was not just a gathering hall. It was an arena. As they entered, the voices grew louder. Hundreds of Dreven filled the seats around a wide, central floor made of white stone. Sunlight poured through an open roof, casting sharp light over the arena. Daniel felt every eye turned toward him as the warband stepped into view. Riva raised her hand, and the crowd fell silent. "People of Varthel," she called out, her voice carrying clearly to every corner. "This is Daniel of Earth. He came to speak for his people. I tested him with the Storm Hall mace, and he stood under its weight." A low ripple of surprise spread through the crowd. Dreven turned to each other, speaking quickly. Some shook their heads, others nodded slowly. Then a voice from the far side called out, "No outsider has done this in living memory." Riva continued, "By the stone oath, he is bound to my side until our trial is complete. He will march with us to the northern pass." Daniel glanced toward her. The way she spoke made it clear there was no question about his involvement. He had been accepted into their tradition, whether he was ready or not. The Dreven warriors behind him began to step forward into the arena's center. Riva gestured for Daniel to follow. As they moved to the middle, he noticed the floor was marked with faint rings, like those in a sparring circle. He had seen similar places in training facilities, though this one was much larger. Torvak, the second in command, walked up to Daniel. His armor was slightly lighter than Riva's, but he still towered over the human. "You held the mace," Torvak said in a deep voice. "That means you are more than a guest. The crowd must see that." "Your strength was no trick," Daniel frowned. "And how do I do that?" Torvak stepped back, raising his own weapon, a long-handled axe with a blade like a crescent moon. "You will face me in the arena, not to harm, only to show the truth of your grip." Daniel's instincts told him this was another test. He refused. They might think the first feat was luck. If he accepted and failed, it could undo the respect he had just earned. He looked at Riva, and she gave a small nod. He took the mace Riva offered him. Its weight settled into his arms again, heavy but familiar. The crowd quieted, waiting. Torvak stepped forward. His strikes were slow at first, almost measured, as if he wanted to see how Daniel would react. Daniel remembered his limited combat, training back on Earth. He kept his feet apart, knees bent, and used the mace to block the axe. Each impact sent a jolt through his arms, but he stayed upright. The crowd began to murmur again. Daniel blocked another strike, then another. His arms burned, but he pushed through it. Torvak increased the force of his swings, and the sound of weapon meeting weapon echoed around the arena. After several exchanges, Torvak stepped back and lowered his axe. He looked at Riva and gave a single nod. "He does not break." A cheer rose from the crowd, deep and rolling. The sound filled the arena and spilled into the streets outside. Daniel straightened his posture, trying not to show how much his muscles ached. He knew this was not a victory in the human sense, but it was clear the Dreven had seen what they needed to see. Riva took the mace from him and lifted it high so the crowd could see. "Daniel of Earth is bound by the pact," she said. "He will stand with us in the trial ahead." The Dreven in the arena seats began to pound the stone benches with their fists in a steady rhythm. It was not hostile. It was a sign of approval, a way of marking someone as worthy. Daniel felt the weight of the moment. For the first time since arriving, he sensed that he was no longer just an outsider. When they left the arena, the sun was higher in the sky. The streets were busier now, and more people stopped to watch them pass. Some even called out words Daniel could not understand, but their tone was friendly. Back at the warband's quarters, Riva spoke to him privately. The room was lined with weapons and armor stands, each holding gear polished to a shine. "You did well," she said. "Many would have failed in the arena." Daniel shrugged lightly. "I only did what I had to do." "That is the way of the Dreven," Riva replied. "We do what is needed, no matter the cost to ourselves. You may not yet know the path ahead, but you have taken your first steps well." Daniel studied her face. She spoke without mockery now. There was a calm respect in her eyes. He realized she was not just a commander by title. She carried herself like someone who had earned her place through many trials. "What exactly is this trial?" he asked. Riva rested the mace against its stand. "We marched to the northern pass in 2 days. Raiders have taken hold there, threatening our border. The pact will end when the pass is secure." Daniel took in her words. This was not going to be a symbolic journey. It was a real mission with real danger. Yet he also felt something unexpected. A spark of determination had started to grow in him since the moment he first lifted the mace. "I'll be ready," he said. Riva gave a short nod. "See that you are." That night, as the war band prepared for the journey, Daniel sat in the quiet of his quarters. The distant sound of Draven voices drifted in from the streets. He thought about the challenge, the arena, and the crowd's reaction. He had come here as a diplomat, but with each step he was being drawn deeper into the Dreven way of life. The morning before their departure, the Dreven capital was buzzing with movement. In the warband's quarters, armor clinked, and boots thudded against stone as warriors prepared for the long march. The air smelled faintly of oil and metal from the weapons being sharpened. Daniel woke early, but most of the Dreven had been up long before him. They moved with calm discipline, checking straps, testing weapons, and packing supplies. He noticed that no one seemed to waste time speaking unless it was necessary. Every movement had purpose. Riva was at the far end of the room, speaking quietly with Torvak. When she noticed Daniel, she waved him over. He crossed the hall, trying not to get in anyone's way. "You have made a place here," Riva said. "The warriors know you now. They will not speak against your presence, but they will watch you." "I understand," Daniel replied. "I'll try not to disappoint them." Riva nodded. "Good. You carry more than your own honor now. When you accepted the mace, you accepted the weight of my line. My victories and failures are now tied to you until this pact ends." Daniel had heard those words before, but now they felt heavier. This was not just about one battle. His actions could affect the respect Riva held among her own people. If he failed, her reputation would suffer too. Torvak stepped forward, holding out a bundle wrapped in dark cloth. "For you," he said. Daniel unwrapped it and found a draven, travel cloak, and a smaller mace. It was not the Storm Hall mace, but it was still made of the same dark metal. "I thought I wasn't supposed to keep weapons," he said. "This is not for ceremony," Torvak explained. "It is for you to use. If you cannot lift it in battle, you will not survive the Northern Pass." Daniel gripped the smaller mace. It was heavy, but manageable with two hands. "I'll get used to it," Riva motioned toward the courtyard outside. "You will have to. Come." Outside, the war band formed into two lines, ready to march. Their armor gleamed in the morning light. Citizens stood along the street, some holding banners, others carrying baskets of dried fruit and bread to hand. To the warriors. As Daniel took his place beside Riva, a few Draven in the crowd called out to him, their tone approving. The march began. The sound of synchronized boots hitting stone echoed through the streets. Daniel could feel the eyes of the city on him. He tried to keep pace with the taller Draven, his smaller legs working harder to match their stride. Once they left the city walls, the road opened into rolling plains. Tall grass swayed in the wind, and dark hills rose in the distance. The sun climbed higher, and heat began to press down on them. The Draven didn't slow, their pace steady and unbroken. By midday, Daniel's shoulders ached from carrying the mace. The weight seemed to pull at his arms more with every mile. He kept reminding himself that showing weakness now would undo the trust he had worked to earn. When they stopped for a short rest, Daniel sat on a flat stone, catching his breath. Torvak dropped down beside him, tearing into a piece of dried meat. "You walk well for someone not born to it," he said. Daniel gave a small smile. "I've had to keep up before, just not with warriors carrying half their body weight in metal." Torvak grunted. "You will learn. Riva will see to that." Daniel glanced toward Riva, who was standing apart, speaking with two scouts. She looked completely at ease, even in the heat. Her armor did not seem to slow her at all. Daniel realized that for her this was not a trial. It was routine. When they set off again, the landscape began to change. The plains gave way to rocky ground, and the wind carried a cooler bite. The road curved upward toward the shadow of the northern mountains. Daniel could see faint lines cutting across the slopes, perhaps old paths or walls long abandoned. That evening, they reached a Draven outpost. It was a cluster of stone buildings built against the side of a hill, with a watchtower rising above them. The outpost guards saluted Riva as she entered. Inside, a fire burned in the central hall, and the smell of hot stew filled the air. Over. The meal, Riva explained more about the trial. "The raiders in the northern pass are not many," she said, "but they know the land and strike without warning. We will need to move carefully. A straight fight will not win the pass." Daniel listened closely. "And my role?" "You are my bonded second until the pact is done," Riva said. "You will carry the mace when I command it. You will stand beside me if we meet their champion." Daniel nearly dropped his spoon. Their champion? Riva met his eyes. If there is to be a duel to settle the matter, it will not be mine alone to fight. That is our way when two leaders are bound. The weight of the pact settled on Daniel in a way it hadn't before. Holding the Storm Hall Mace in the capital had been a test, but this was different. This meant he might have to fight for real. Torvak spoke up. Do not fear. You will not face them unprepared. Tomorrow, we train. The next morning, Daniel was in the courtyard before the suns had fully risen. The air was sharp and cold, and the ground was still damp with dew. Torvak handed him the smaller mace. We begin with grip, Torvak said. If your hands fail, the rest does not matter. For hours, Daniel practiced swinging, blocking, and shifting his stance. The Dreven moves were simple but powerful, relying on balance and raw force. His arms trembled by midday, but Torvak kept pushing him. Riva watched from the wall above, saying little, but Daniel could feel her eyes on him. By the time the sun began to sink, his arms felt like stone, yet he found he could lift the mace more steadily than the day before. That night, he lay in the outpost's small sleeping room, staring at the ceiling. His body ached, but his mind was sharp. The pact had started as an accident. Now, it was becoming something else. He was not sure if he was ready for the trial ahead, but he knew he could not turn away from it. The wind outside carried the faint sound of distant howls from the mountains. Daniel closed his eyes, gripping the edge of his blanket. The northern pass was waiting, and soon they would be there. The next morning, the warband set out from the outpost before the suns had fully risen. The air was sharp and cold, carrying the scent of pine from the forests ahead. Frost clung to the edges of the stones on the road, and Daniel's breath formed, clouds in front of his face. The Dreven marched in steady formation, their armor catching the first light of day. The path wound upward into the foothills. On either side, steep cliffs and rocky slopes rose high above them. Daniel kept pace beside Riva, the smaller mace strapped across his back. His legs ached from the training, but he pushed forward. The sound of boots and the faint rattle of weapons filled the narrow pass. By mid-morning, they reached a ridge that overlooked a wide valley. Far to the north, jagged peaks cut into the sky, their slopes covered in shadow. Somewhere beyond those peaks lay the northern pass, and beyond that, the raiders. The warband paused to rest. Riva spoke quietly with two scouts, who then set off. Ahead, at a quick pace, Daniel sat on a flat rock, pulling a canteen from his pack. Torvak joined him, carrying a strip of dried meat. Your steps are steady, Torvak said. Not bad for one who has not marched with warriors before. Daniel smiled faintly. I am trying to keep up. I do not want to be the reason the pace slows. Torvak tore off a piece of meat and nodded. Good. A war band moves as one. If one falters, all falter. They moved on after a short break. The road narrowed further, forcing them into a single line. The cliffs rose higher, and Daniel noticed deep cuts in the stone walls, as if something had once struck them with great force. The air grew colder with each step. By the time they reached the edge of a dense forest, the light was fading. Riva ordered them to make camp. The Dreven worked quickly, building fires and setting guards along the edges. Daniel helped gather wood, his breath clouding in the cold evening air. That night they ate around the fire. The Dreven shared stories of past battles, speaking in their deep, steady voices. Daniel listened closely, learning more about their ways. They valued truth, but also action. A story without proof was nothing. When the fire burned low, Riva spoke to Daniel. You are learning, she said. You walk with the band and carry the weight without complaint. I am starting to see why your people are so respected. Daniel replied. It is not just strength, it is how you use it together. Riva gave a small nod. Strength without discipline is only chaos. The next morning they set off again. The forest was thick, and the sunlight barely reached the ground. Daniel could hear the distant rush of water somewhere to the east. The path was uneven, and more than once he had to steady himself on nearby trees. In the afternoon, the scouts returned. One of them, a young draven named Ron, spoke quickly to Riva. She listened, her expression hardening. "What is it?" Daniel asked. "Tracks ahead," Riva said. "The raiders are near. They have been watching the road." The pace slowed. The warband moved with silent caution, their boots making little sound on the forest floor. Daniel kept his hand near the handle of the mace, his senses sharpened. Every crack of a twig seemed louder than it should. By evening, they reached a rocky clearing with a narrow trail leading upward. Riva halted the group. "We make camp here," she said. "The pass is close. Tomorrow we meet them." Daniel helped set up the camp, but his thoughts were on the coming day. He had seen the Dreven train and fight among themselves, but he had not yet faced a real enemy. The idea of standing in a duel with Riva's fate, tied to his own, sent a shiver through him. Later, as the firelight flickered against the stone walls of the clearing, Riva sat beside him. "You will not face them alone," she said. "If there is a duel, I will fight beside you." Daniel met her gaze. "I just hope I can be the ally you need." "You will," Riva replied. "You have already proven you can hold the weight. Now you must show that you can use it." The night passed slowly. Daniel lay awake for a long time, listening to the sound of the wind in the trees. Somewhere far above the peaks loomed, and beyond them, the trial awaited. At dawn, the war band moved out once more. The trail climbed steeply, winding through narrow passes where only two could walk side by side. The air was thin and sharp, making each breath feel colder. When they reached a wide ledge overlooking the northern pass, Daniel saw it at last. The path through the mountains was guarded by a wall of jagged rock, with narrow gaps that could be easily defended. On the far side, small fires burned. Figures moved among them. The raiders. Riva studied the view for a long moment. "We will challenge them at midday," she said. "It is the Dreven way to give the enemy time to answer." The war band set their packs down and prepared their weapons. Daniel felt the weight of the mace in his hands and tried a few practice swings. His arms felt stronger than they had days ago, but the weapon still demanded respect. When the sun was high, Riva stepped forward to the edge of the pass and called out in a voice that carried across the rocks. "I am Riva of the Dreven Empire. I claim this pass by right of strength. Send your champion, and we will settle this without the blood of many." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from the far side, a figure emerged from the shadows. The raider champion was tall, even for his kind, and wore spiked armor that glinted in the light. In his hands was a massive war hammer. He stepped forward, his voice deep. "I will face you, Dreven, but your bond demands two. Bring the one who carries your second weight." All eyes turned to Daniel. He felt the heat of the moment, the weight of every gaze on him. Slowly, he stepped forward, gripping his mace. Riva looked at him once. "Stand with me, Daniel of Earth." He nodded. "I'm ready." The duel was about to begin. The wind swept through the narrow pass like a wild beast, carrying the sharp scent of stone and cold air. Daniel stood side by side with Riva, their weapons ready. The raider champion faced them, his warhammer heavy in his hands. The ground beneath them was rough, covered with loose rocks and dust that shifted with every step. The crowd of warriors from both sides formed a circle, watching silently. No one spoke. The tension was thick, like the air before a storm. Riva's eyes met Daniel's. She gave a small nod, steady and sure. Daniel tightened his grip on the mace, feeling its weight settle firmly in his hands. His muscles ached, but his mind was clear. The raider lifted his warhammer, swinging it in a slow, powerful arc. Daniel moved quickly, stepping to the side and raising the mace to block. The force of the blow shook his arms, but he held firm. The ground trembled beneath the impact. Riva attacked from the other side, her own mace striking the raider's shoulder. He staggered slightly, surprised by the quickness of the attack. Daniel saw his chance and swung his mace with all his strength, aiming for the raider's side. The raider twisted away, the mace missing by inches. He grunted and countered with a low strike, forcing Daniel to step back. The dance of attack and defense continued, each moment a test of strength and will. Daniel's arms burned with effort, but he remembered the training. The weight of the mace was heavy, but it was also steady in his hands. He focused on balance and timing rather than pure force. Riva circled around, watching carefully. When the raider raised his warhammer for a strong overhead strike, Daniel ducked and rolled forward, bringing his mace up under the enemy's guard. The weapon connected with a solid thud against the raider's knee. The champion grunted in pain and stumbled. Riva seized the moment, her mace striking his side again. The raider fell to one knee, breathing hard. Daniel took a deep breath, steadying himself. The crowd held its breath. The raider looked up, nodding slowly in respect. Riva stepped back and raised her mace high. "The pass is ours," she declared. The pact is honored. The raiders' warriors lowered their weapons, and the tension in the air eased. Daniel felt the eyes of the Dreven warriors on him, not as a stranger, but as one of their own. Riva turned to Daniel, a proud smile on her face. "You have held the weight when it mattered most. The bond is fulfilled." Daniel wiped sweat from his brow, feeling a mix of relief and pride. He had not only survived the trial, but had earned the respect of a warrior people far from home. The path ahead was still long, but now he knew he was more than just a visitor. He was part of something greater, a bond of honor, strength, and trust. The morning after the duel was calm and quiet. The sun rose slowly over the northern pass, casting warm light on the tired faces of the Draven warriors. Daniel woke early, feeling the ache in his arms from the battle, but also a new strength inside him. The weight of the mace was no longer just a burden. It was a symbol of something more. Outside the camp, the raiders had pulled back, retreating into the shadowed mountains. The threat to the northern border had ended, at least for now. The Dreven warriors gathered around fires, sharing quiet words and tending to their wounds. Riva stood near the center of the camp, her silver armor marked with scratches from the fight. She looked out over the warriors and then toward Daniel, who approached slowly, still carrying the smaller mace. "You have done well," Riva said quietly, her voice carrying the respect earned only in battle. "Not many would stand where you stood." Daniel nodded. "I only did what was needed. You and your people have shown me much." Riva's eyes softened. "This is more than a trial. It is a test of honor and trust. You have passed." Around them, the other warriors came forward. Some offered words in the Dreven tongue, and Daniel caught the meaning even if he did not know the language. They welcomed him into their circle. That evening, the warband held a feast. Fires blazed against the darkening sky, and tables were spread, with roasted meats, fresh fruits, and strong, sweet drinks. The warriors sang songs of old battles and heroes. Daniel sat beside Riva, feeling a sense of belonging he had never known before. A young Dreven woman named Mira came to his side. She handed him a simple braided band made of silver threads. "For you," she said with a small smile. "A symbol of the bond you share with us." Daniel accepted it carefully, slipping it onto his wrist. It felt light, but important. Riva raised her voice, quieting the crowd. "Tonight we honor the bond that holds us. Daniel of Earth stood with us in battle. He is no longer a stranger, but a warrior among the Dreven." The crowd cheered, their voices echoing through the valley. Daniel looked around, seeing faces lit by firelight full of respect and acceptance. Later, as the fires died down and the stars shone overhead, Daniel and Riva spoke quietly near the edge of the camp. "What now?" Daniel asked. "Is the pact truly over?" Riva shook her head. "The trial is over, but the bond remains. You have joined our people, at least for a time. When you return home, you will carry the weight of the mace in your heart." Daniel looked at her. "I did not expect to find this friendship, honor, and trust so far from Earth." Riva smiled. "The universe is full of surprises. You have proven that strength is more than muscle. It is the will to stand when others fall." Daniel felt a deep calm settle over him. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he was no longer alone. He belonged to something greater than himself. The journey back to the Dreven capital was quieter than the march to the northern pass. The raiders had vanished into the mountains, and the threat to the border was ended. Yet Daniel felt something had changed inside him. He was no longer the visitor who had come to speak of peace. He was a warrior, bound by honor to the Dreven people. Riva walked beside him as they crossed the wide plains. The mace, once heavy and strange, now felt like a part of him. He carried it not just as a weapon, but as a symbol of the bond they shared. The warriors around them nodded in respect, their eyes no longer filled with doubt, but with recognition. When they reached the capital, the streets were alive with celebration. Citizens gathered to welcome the warband home. Banners flew high, and the sound of music filled the air. Daniel noticed the smiles on the faces of the Dreven, their pride in the victory clear. At the great hall, Riva spoke before the crowd. "Daniel of Earth has stood with us in battle. He has honored the bond of the Stormhall Mace and proven his strength and courage. Today he is one of us." The crowd cheered, voices echoing off the stone walls. Daniel stepped forward, feeling the weight of their acceptance. He thought of his home world so far away, and the journey that had brought him here. Later, in the quiet of the hall, Riva handed him the Stormhall mace. "By tradition, this is yours now," she said. "You have earned it." Daniel held the weapon carefully. It was heavier than before, but it carried a new meaning. "I will keep it with honor," he promised. Riva smiled. "And when the time comes, you will bring our peoples closer. The bond you carry is more than strength. It is trust." Daniel nodded. "I will do everything I can." As he prepared to leave the Dreven capital and return to Earth, Daniel felt a deep sense of purpose. The mace was no longer just a weapon. It was a symbol of unity between two worlds. His mission had begun as a hope for peace, but had grown into something stronger. Walking through the city one last time, Daniel saw warriors and citizens alike looking at him with respect. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he was ready. The bond of the mace had changed him. In the stars above, the twin sons of Varthel set behind the mountains. Daniel lifted the mace one last time, feeling its steady weight. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He had found a place among warriors